February 14th, 1943. 21,000 feet over the slot, Solomon Islands. The new fighter's propeller claws at the pale morning sky, and the big Pratt & Whitney R-2800 shakes the cockpit like a growling animal. First, Lieutenant Kenneth A. Walsh of VMF 124 checks his mixture, thumbs the trigger guard, and eases the nose right to keep the sun off his canopy. Below and ahead, iron-colored water cuts between island chains. Kolombangara, New Georgia, the same black lane that's been ferrying trouble up from Rabaul for months. His flight of 4 F4U Corsairs slides into fingertip, glossy sea blue with that odd, down-angled wing root that made even Marines snort when they first saw it on the ramp at Fighter 1. Lead to 2. Tally 4 bogeys, Angels 2-0, 11 o'clock high, Walsh says, voice level. The reply clicks back. 2. There's an audible grin in the radio, the way men sound when they're trying to be brave. Out beyond the sun glare, 4 A6M Zeros skate in, white and neat, their pilots already rolling to meet the new shapes. The Japanese had heard about the bent-wing bird, and they laughed at it. Gull wings? A fat radial with a cowl big as a barrel? Not a knife-fighting machine, not a Zero. The lead Zero starts a climbing turn, inviting the usual mistake. Walsh doesn't take it. Keep it fast, he says. Boom only. Don't turn with 'em. He rocks the Corsair to the right, pushes the nose down a hair until the airspeed tape jumps past 300, and then he drops the nose into the first pass. The Corsair whistles, a knife-edge rising note that seems to come from deep in the wing roots, and 650 Brownings snarl as he squeezes. Tracers reach up and stitch the Zero's left wing. The Japanese pilot jerks away. Too late. The Corsair flashes through. No turning contest. Not for this airplane. Walsh drives downhill, counts 1,000, and only then pulls into a climbing arc to reset. Back at Henderson, they had told the squadron to fly it like a hammer falling off a table. The F4U's inverted gull wing had been a solution, not a joke. It let Vought fit a huge prop for the 2,000 horsepower double Wasp while keeping the landing gear short and strong. The same wing that looked odd on the ground made pure speed in a dive, and kept that speed through a pass. If you didn't try to slow dance with a Zero, you could choose the fight, make one kill, and be gone before the enemy bled you with little green tracers. Walsh's wingman breathes. Splash one. And there's a flash in his peripheral vision. The Zero he'd clipped is descending with a streak of flame, licking the trailing edge. Walsh rolls level. 2 more Zeros spiral toward his lead element, but the Americans keep the vertical. The Corsair's nose shudders with another burst. Empty brass clinks down the fuselage and glitters in the sun. Event detail. In early 1943, the Vought F4U Corsair entered combat with Marine Fighter Squadron VMF 124 from Guadalcanal and the Russell Islands. It was fast, over 400 MavalAviation, carried 650 caliber Browning machine guns, and could dive hard without shedding speed. A trait the lighter A6M Zero couldn't match. Because early F4U carrier landings were tricky, the Marines flew it from land bases first, while the Navy kept refining it. The Corsair's wing root intakes and cowl geometry gave it a distinctive whistle, which along with its lethal dives helped build the legend that Japanese pilots came to respect and fear. A Zero slices across his nose, close enough that Walsh can see the pilot's scarf whip in the breeze. He pushes the stick forward, unloads, and the airframe hums. The Corsair's big prop bites again. 2, take high cover, Walsh calls. He dips the wing end and watches the ocean widen beneath him until the horizon bends. The Zero tries to come around in a flat sweep. It's quicker in the horizontal. But when Walsh pulls up, the F4U climbs like a homesick angel, and the Japanese fighter stalls out and drops a wingtip in protest. He's on it, patient. The sight's pipper drifts, crosses the Zero's canopy, settles on the engine. Another short burst. The enemy can't take many 50s in the nose. A black puff, a smear of smoke. The fighter falls away. Lead, fuel check, someone says. Walsh glances at the gauge and at the tiny beads of sweat on his nose. Heat builds inside a Corsair, even at 20,000. He licks dry lips, tastes the metallic bite of cordite. "We're good," he says. "Set course south. We're not greedy." As they wheel home, the ocean chalks into a brighter blue, and the slot's shoulders close behind them. The bent-wing birds drop toward Henderson, and Walsh can't help grinning. Let them laugh at the gull wing on the ground. Up here, it's the last thing the enemy hears. A whistle, and then the thunder of 6 machine guns. March 30th, 1943. Fighter 1, Guadalcanal. Dust plumes off the strip as a Corsair bounces, the Oleo struts yelping, tail swinging. Crew chiefs wave it in with paddles, grinning behind oil-smudged faces. The F4U on rollout shimmies like a colt, then straightens as the pilot feeds brake with a boot. Marines grab the wingtips and haul it to the revetment, shouting over the red-hot rasp of the R-2800 winding down. Captain Pappy Boyington, not yet a legend, just a lean man with a tired face and hungry eyes, leans against a sandbag wall watching new replacements cluster around an airplane. He taps ash off a cigarette. "You turn with a Zero, you die," he says, not raising his voice. "You go down like a stone, then up like you've got the devil himself under the hood. You live." The Corsair's quirks are no longer news. Every man on the line has the bruises to prove it. On carriers, the bird's long nose hides the deck, and the stiff landing gear can bounce her into the air again if you don't land like a saint. That's why the Navy let the Marines take her to the islands first. From coral and dirt, the F4U can run long, roll past, breathe. From here, it can be what it was built to be. A fast, heavy-hitting brawler that fights on its own terms. Again, Boyington says. The newest pilots gather behind a plywood map of the slot. A grease pencil circles Rabaul. They've switched some of the boys over to A6M5s, faster in a dive, tougher wings. Doesn't matter. Don't flat turn with them. Keep your knots up. 1 pass, 1 kill. Out past the revetments, VF-17, a Navy squadron forced ashore by the F4U's early carrier troubles, taxi their Corsairs in a line, skull and bones painted beneath the cockpit rails. "Jolly Rogers," someone says, half envious, half amused. Boyington squints through the heat shimmer. "They'll draw attention," he says. "Good, we'll need some." The afternoon raid call comes with the same clipped urgency it always has. Bogies inbound, multiple, high. The scramble is muscle memory now. Pilots slam canopies, roll throttles forward until the big radials scream, and the bent-wing birds bound down the strip with a wobble before shouldering themselves into the air. On climb-out, Boyington's voice is a wire. "Keep it together, boys." The flight level's at 18,000. The sun angles low, turning the sea to hammered pewter. Zeros appear, not many, but enough to bloody anyone who tries to duel them. A few Val dive bombers glitter like spearheads in the middle distance. Lieutenant Ira Ike Kepford, over from VF-17 to swap notes, kicks a Corsair into a high-side pass and rakes a Val from canopy to tail. The bomber bursts, becomes a bright, brief wound on the air before smearing into the sea. Kepford rolls out clean. No pull-hard turn, just speed, 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 using the F4U like a lead pipe in a dark alley. The Japanese had come to scoff. "Clumsy," some of their pilots wrote. "That big nose, that gull wing like a seabird." But the laughter thins when you're forced into the vertical and a blue airplane falls on you like a hawk from the sun, shrieking as the wind plays the Corsair's intakes like a flute. the Marines begin to hear it over the radio net from coast watchers. Enemy pilots whispering a nickname. Whistling death. Walsh finds himself in the pocket again, above a Zero that's trying to torque into a turn. He refuses the invitation. He stays high, floats rate enclosure in his head, and at the right instant, shoves the stick forward, lets the speed build until the cockpit buzzes, and blows through the enemy's circle with a quarter-second burst that saws a wingtip away. By the time the sunlight turns amber, the fight is broken. Bombers, those that survive, are running north under a protective umbrella of Zeros, and the Americans, low on ammo, don't chase into the teeth of Rabaul's flak. They lope home, engines rough with the first hints of salt and dust. Back on the ramp, the ground crews swarm, checking the flash hiders on the Brownings, unstrapping ammo cans, pulling cowl panels warm enough to burn a man's hands. Boyington watches Kepford pencil a small skull beneath his canopy rail, a ritual more for the crew than for him. Then turns to the new men and points at the F4U's gull wing. "Find it funny now?" he asks, not smiling. One of the replacements, soot-streaked and newly quiet, shakes his head. "No, sir," he says. "It's beautiful." Night comes hard and fast in the Solomons. Beyond the trees, lamps glow intense where men write home about dinner and heat rash and a new airplane that sounds like a kettle about to scream. They don't know they're writing history. They just know the bent-wing bird brought them home. November 1943. Over St. George's Channel, north of Rabaul. The sky is crowded and ugly, the way it gets when a big strike goes in. Dozens of U.S. bombers plod toward the smoking crater that is Rabaul's harbor, and every fighter in the Solomons seems to be here. VF-17's skull and bones Corsairs weaving over the top, VMF-214's blue shapes scattered like angry hornets, and Zeros coiling down from different altitudes to cut the head off the snake. Walsh is leading a division today, a stripe of authority he barely feels qualified to wear. "Hold high cover," he says, voice flat to keep the shake out. Kepford, off to the west, is already doing what he does best, threading passes down the edges of Zero swarms, carving a path and refusing to tangle. The air shakes with flak, the kind that sprinkles you with shrapnel, even when the bursts look far away. Rabaul's batteries are awake, and black puffs staircase up through 12,000, 14,000, 16,000 feet. The Corsair shrugs it off better than most. Tough skin, tough engine. But you can taste the cordite and the fear through the oxygen mask. Every man knows this place is supposed to be death to fighters. A Zero slides onto a bomber's 6, nosing up into a shallow climb to match the target's lazy arc. Walsh knifes in, keeps his angle shallow, and holds the trigger only long enough to see glass burst, a panel tear, the Zero drop a wing. He flashes past and up again, eyes raking the sky for the next problem. Down low, an F4U dives so hard its prop bites vapor into corkscrews. You can always tell when a Corsair is in a true, angry dive. It whistles like a tea kettle, a hard, metallic skirl that seems to hit your teeth. The first time some Japanese pilots heard it behind them, they thought it was flak. Then the tracers reached them. Rabaul costs the Americans airplanes, no question. But it costs Japan something it can't replace: trained pilots. The Zero is still elegant, still deadly in a flat circle. The pilots flying it are brave. And yet, each month after the Corsair arrives, the calculus tilts. The F4U can chase a Zero down in a dive the A6M can't safely sustain. It can take punishment and fly home. And when U.S. squadrons weld their doctrine to their machines, altitude, speed, teamwork, the results compound. By early 1944, the laugh lines about the bent-wing bird have faded into a wary respect. Some Japanese diaries call it the whistling one. Others say nothing at all. Pilots who don't come back don't write. What does come back to Rabaul's planners are weathered reports. Enemy fighters faster, heavier fire. Diving attacks from high quarter. A note scrawled in a margin. Avoid vertical where possible. At Piva and Torokina on Bougainville, Corsair revetments multiply in the mud like mushrooms after rain. Navy and Marine squadrons share tricks, merge patrol tracks, invent the kind of shorthand only men who fly for their lives can understand. Hi, Jolly. Someone calls over the net, VF-17 passing overhead. Whistles inbound. Another voice laughs, Marines dropping in from the sun. There's a rumor on the line that the Brits have been flying Corsairs off carriers without bumping them off the deck like pogo sticks, and that the Navy will try again soon with new mods. The airplane that came ashore as a kind of problem child is growing into the job it was meant to do. Not just as a hunter, but as a fighter bomber, hurling 500-pounders and rockets into revetments and airfields to make the next day's fight smaller. Walsh taxis in at dusk, tires popping over coral, and kills the mixture. The R-2800 cycles down with a barking cough and a deep, satisfied sigh. The crew chief pops the cowl and whistles at what looks like a blackjack's worth of oil slung up the firewall. "You bring any of it back?" he asks. "Some," Walsh says. And only later, pen scratching in a dim tent, does he admit the truth onto paper. The Corsair saved him twice today. Once with speed. Once because it came home on a cylinder bank that would have killed any lesser engine. Somewhere north, a Zero squadron commander writes his own notes, careful block characters under a lamp. "New American fighter not to be turned with," he writes. Climbs strongly after diving pass. Heavy fire. Whistling sound heard before attack. No man on either side reads the other's words yet. But the air over the Solomons is teaching the same lesson in two languages. Laugh at a machine if you must. If it can outclimb you, outdive you, and shoot you full of half-inch holes before you can blink, the laughter dies quick. May 11th, 1944. A fast carrier task group, Central Pacific. Sunlight turns the Pacific into a plain of hammered light as the deck crew dances the semaphore of launch. This Corsair's different, a late F4U with tweaks that tame the bounce and widen the pilot's view. A shipboard fighter at last. A yellow shirt points, the pilot salutes, the throttle slides forward, and that same old double wasp roar drowns the world. The bent-wing bird leaps down the deck, lifts clean, and banks into the stream of blue airplanes heading west. Below, ordnance men fit rockets to hardpoints on other F4Us, chalking tidy kill marks and tiny bombs onto cowlings that have seen too many salt dawns. The Corsair is no longer just a hunter. It's a bruiser, a ship killer in miniature when it needs to be. A runway chewer, a bunker breaker. On strike days, they call it the Sunday punch. When it meets Zeros now, it meets the tougher A6M5s with thicker wing skins and better speed. It meets newer Japanese pilots, brave but less trained, and older ones who are tired through the bones. The tactics don't change much because they don't need to. Corsairs work in pairs and fours, high and sunward, and drop like the hammer in a bell. Their 6 Brownings rip bright beads across blue sky and into aluminum. On the Marshalls, on the Marianas crown of islands, at Palau and the Palaus's teak-colored lagoons. Blue-winged F4Us nose over to strafe barges, robe themselves in dust on dirt strips where they'd never been meant to land, and stand quick reaction for any raid that dares to test a task group. If you are standing on a gun sponson when they return at dusk, you can hear the thing that gave them their legend. The wind song in the wing roots. The kettle whistle rush just before a pass. A weirdly merry sound for a machine built to break things. June 1944. Gives the Pacific its most famous turkey shoot. A day of falling Japanese aircraft. But the skies are ruled by blue-gray cats and bent-wing birds alike. In that long summer, What began on coral strips becomes doctrine across navies. Fight vertical when you can. Strike and climb. Never trade speed for a slow roll with an airplane that was born thin. The Corsair's last tests come not in duels over the slot, but in the low, hateful fights against airfields and ships, and by 1945, men who turned their airplanes into weapons. On approach to Okinawa, April winds carry oily smoke and the smell of coral dust. A Corsair pair claws skyward from a picket destroyer's umbrella, catching a glinting dot before it can dive. The lead pilot does the math on closure, angle, and hope. And when the range stamps itself into his eyes, he fires until his guns are empty or the dot disappears. Down in the islands, the Marines push through limestone and graves. Above them, F4Us rake caves and hillsides. And when the radios crackle banzai, the bent-winged birds are already falling, rockets hissing off rails, bomb racks snapping, 50s walking through scrub. A squad leader on the ground won't remember the airplane's model. He'll remember the whistle and the way the horizon seemed to hold its breath till the sound passed. Some nights, in blacked-out ready rooms, pilots pin little paper maps to cork and mark lines from their carriers to their targets and back. They're not thinking about nicknames or myths. They're thinking about oil temperature and ammo load, and which of their friends didn't come back that afternoon. But when the mailbags open and clippings tumble out, newspapers from home full of war-softened jokes and glory, some of them catch the phrase that's caught on: whistling death. They don't argue. It's not a thing you argue with. It's a thing you live through or you don't. In a different darkness, far to the west, a Zero pilot kneels at a low table and closes his eyes. He can't see the airplane that hunts him, only the shape it makes in the mind. A gull's wing turned downward, a snout like a barrel, the sudden scream of air where metal meets the invisible. On an island airstrip scorched pale by the day, he will hear that whistle again tomorrow. War ends, as all wars do, in paperwork and silence that feels too big. The bent-winged birds will taxi to a stop, one by one. Some will be sold for scrap. Some will sleep in museums, glossy again and worshipped by boys who only know their names from books. A few will fly on, wearing civilian registrations and rumbling the way they did when the world was young and on fire. When the stories are told at last, by men with silver at their temples and by diaries pulled from footlockers, the laughter that greeted an odd-looking wing fades to a footnote in a much larger tale. In the machine age, beauty is what keeps you alive. And sometimes beauty looks like a bent wing and a whistle that means somebody else won't see the sun again. The Pacific taught its lesson to anyone who could stand to learn it. Mock the shape if you like. Measure the climb, the dive, the sting in the guns, and the engine that gets you home on a bad day. By those measures, the F4U Corsair did not just survive, it ruled.